Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's call. This is the Patient and Family Engagement, including patients, families, and caregivers in quality assessment and performance improvement and or governing body meetings. My name is O'Neil Delva. I'll serve as your technical host for today's event. And before officially turning over to Ann Pugh with ESRD Network 17 to assist us with today's discussion, let's just go ahead and go over a couple housekeeping items that will be used to assist us as part of today's call. Just a reminder that all lines are currently muted. They are muted to help us with reducing any background sounds from coming through to today's call, but we do encourage that you get involved, and you can communicate with us by using the chat feature. Now, as mentioned a moment ago, the screenshot that we have here represents the old WebEx system, but there is an update. But if you look at on the right-hand side of your screen, the chat option, you'll be able to send in messages to us, and we do ask that you please select all panelists when sending in your messages and your questions, as well as indicate the ESRD network you are with. So you'd say, question for Network 17 or question for Network 7, or if you just know the name of the person, you can provide the first name so that it comes through to all panelists and it can get routed to the proper person to assist with providing you with a response, hopefully before we end today's event. Reminder that today's call is being recorded. Wanted to let you know that, as well as today, one continuing education unit is being offered for this session. Here, let me show you on screen the screenshot as to how and what you'll see. At the end of the session, a post-event evaluation will display, giving you the ability to provide your thoughts. Once you have provided your thoughts as part of the post-event survey or evaluation, you will then be presented with a screen that gives you the ability to obtain the CE certificate. With that, I'll turn it over to Ann Pugh to assist us with getting our call started. Ann?
Thank you, O'Neil. Welcome, everybody. It's really great to have everyone on the call. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you, Ann.
Lovely. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about patient and family engagement. This has been a great theme in healthcare all along, and even more in recent times, especially with the increased focus from CMS on this topic. And so we're going to, today we're going to be talking about including patients, family, and caregivers in the monthly quality meetings that are held at clinics. Do I have the ball, O'Neil?
I believe you do.
I do.
Yes, you do.
There we go. These, again, all lines are muted. Any chats, you've gone through this, and this as well. At the end of the meeting, these are the objectives for today. We did kind of have a large number of false positives on the root cause analysis that we had sent out, asking people what they perceive might be barriers to inviting patients or family or caregivers to these monthly clinic outcome meetings. And I think a lot of people kind of misunderstood and thought patient plan of care meetings. So a lot of people initially said, oh yeah, we already invite people. So we kind of redid that. So that explains why some of you got the link a second time to kind of see what the barriers could be in your clinic to this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the results from that SurveyMonkey today. We're going to be sharing some resources today and also kind of talking a little bit about how do you do this. This is not something where there's a clear history and policy and procedure that we can refer to. It's not something that's prohibited for most dialysis companies, but it's certainly not something that everybody has done recently. So it's just it's another way of getting patients and family engaged in our work in dialysis and kind of being part of the entire of getting great outcomes and having a good quality of life on dialysis. So these are the three areas that the network has been focusing on this year with facilities. Any facilities that are in a quality improvement activity have all been asked to consider any of these three areas: support groups, improving patient participation in family of care, and patient plan of care meetings, and also including people in the QAPI and or governing body meetings. Today we're going to have the privilege of hearing from a facility and a patient that have actually implemented the idea of having a patient come to QAPI. We are going to be welcoming Ms. Susan and Ms. Donna from Lynn Haven, Debita in Florida. A little bit later in the call, we're going to review some of our root cause analysis results, and we'll have a brief discussion. It'll be a little bit of an odd discussion because with this many people on the call, we are going to be doing things via chat. So if we run long, we will kind of complete it via email. We're also just going to talk a little bit about this idea. I think it has a lot of power to really change how QAPI, FHM, however one calls these meetings, how they go down in clinics. So this is a basic VTAG, you know, from the conditions for coverage that kind of describes what what quality improvement, what QAPI is. So governing body, I kind of think of governing body really shorthandedly. I think of them being more the business of the clinic, and the quality assessment performance improvement meeting has more to do with the overall health of the facilities. When we speak to patients, I sometimes say, you know, patients get their individual report cards, like say from the dietitian, but in QAPI, it's the clinic reviewing their report card. This is a condition about QAPI. You guys are probably familiar with this. It's the idea of quality, continuous quality improvement every month, looking for trends and addressing them as a group every month in a meeting. So here's some results from the Survey Monkey that we had you all fill out. Thank you very much for doing so. These are the results from Network 17, but they were similar across networks, at least to my knowledge. So far it looks like people seem to be a little bit more willing to consider having a patient at the quality assessment performance improvement meeting. That is the one that does not include upper management, and it usually does not involve personnel issues as much as the other. I hope I'm correct in that. These are some of the reasons that we put forth to say why a patient, these are some of the perceived barriers from clinics. We pretty much ask, like, so you tell us you have not done this. What are things that you think would stop your clinic from doing it right now? What are things that might be a pushback situation that maybe could be addressed? Because unless we look at barriers, we can't figure out how to surmount them. So it looks like the number one is people were concerned about confidentiality, and people are also concerned about the absence of a policy and procedure, which is also can be perceived as precedent. You know, if it's never been done before, in general, we tend to look for a policy and procedure that's been established. Some facilities didn't feel that they had a patient that would have anything to add, that would be a willing or a family or a caregiver, of course, that would be something to add, have something to add to this monthly quality improvement meeting. And so these are things that we, once we have our root cause analysis, that leads us to kind of figure out what kind of interventions we can develop to help clinics kind of get past these barriers. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. At first, I wanted to welcome Ms. Susan and Ms. Donna Schutz, who's a patient advocate from Lynn Haven Dialysis, to talk a little bit about how they implemented this. They did this on their own, and at this point, Donna has attended 2 QAPI meetings. And so welcome, Ms. Susan. Are you on the line?
And let me unmute the lines just to see if she is currently connected, because earlier we were able to identify the line for Ms. Safari, and I don't see her on as of right now. Let me unmute the lines for everyone so we can identify her line. Just one moment. All right, everyone, the line's about to be unmuted. Go ahead. What are you going to say, Ann?
Go ahead. She said she is on the call, but she was muted. That was about 101.
Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and unmute the line. The lines are unmuted.
Well, they have Donna listed, because she was in the Shinsley file, and she's listed as a member of. What's the MTA?
Let me mute the line just again.
And I can't change it. So I had to send it up. Yeah.
All right, and one moment, let me see. We're trying to identify the line for Donna. One moment.
Donna and Susan are together. They're both sitting in the same room, O'Neill. So it's Ms. Susan Safari Sadalou and Ms. Donna Schutz.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then let me unmute that line then, the line that we unmuted earlier all right, so Donna, are you currently connected? Can you hear us okay? We unmuted the line for Ms. Safari, or that we unmuted earlier in the call.
Okay.
No?
Well,
and I believe you said they're all in the same room, correct?
that's what I was told.
Okay, I unmuted the line, calling user 20. That's, Ms. Safari, are you currently on? Can you hear me okay?
Okay, well, I guess we will need to go forward and I will try to interpret the slides and the information that they gave me in their stead. And if you guys could chat to O'Neill and we'll try to figure out how to get you to join the line, that would be wonderful. So Susan and Robin Wood Gay is the group FA for this facility, and Ms. Susan is the FA for the facility. And Robin had told me that they had heard about this idea at the Network 7 Council meeting, and she said initially she had kind of had this feeling like, oh my God, we've never done this. I don't think we could ever do this. And these were the things that first kind of came to her mind. She was concerned that it might change kind of the atmosphere of the meeting, that people might not be able to speak freely, and that the professionals might need. Ms. Susan, is that you? Or Ms. Donna? Okay. And so they were concerned about, and these are things that many people have voiced to us, being concerned about privacy, because although QAPI is not supposed to include patients' individual health information, it invariably can happen because someone will say, well, who are these two outliers that we're looking at in the phosphorus graph? And then somebody may say their name. So many FAs and clinic managers have voiced that they're concerned about privacy, and our response had been, well, perhaps we can kind of figure out how to limit that. Also, the ability to speak freely. There are some things that happen in a clinic that could potentially be scary for patients, and she was also concerned about the complexity of terms and language. I must say, as a social worker who's attended many a QAPI meeting, some parts of those meetings to this day I don't completely understand, things about RO membranes and, the pH balance. Some of these things, I mean, even for the professionals, maybe a little bit outside our scope, of our ability. So it's something that she was concerned about. And then she started thinking about Donna, who she thought would be a perfect patient to do this with. And Donna had some ideas about things to bring up. And so she was concerned about the visiting hours, kind of how this works, whether or not visitors are allowed to come in during turnover or not, and how this would work with PPE and the like. She was also concerned about that particular clinic is in the network QIA to grow home modalities. And Donna is somebody who had opinions about how to help this. And also Donna apparently was also very concerned about the importance of including the patient voice. And so she thought about it, and after talking with Donna, she said, you know what, let's go do this. So at this moment, I'm going to pause briefly. O'Neill, have we had any luck with getting Donna or Susan on the line?
Rick Lynn sent me a message earlier saying that if maybe they can hang up and reconnect. I'm looking at the call-in connection now. If they do, then I'll unmute the latest connection. Let me unmute the line that we identified earlier, once again, as belonging to Ms. Safari. So let me unmute the line just to see if she's currently connected. All right, Ms. Safari, are you connected? Can you hear us okay? Okay, so, and if you said that they're in the same room, I'm unmuting that line, and I'm not hearing anything as of right now. I'm not sure if you're currently muted on your end, but you're unmuted on this end. But I'll continue to monitor. If you want to circle back to see if they connect, we can unmute the latest connection to see if they're connected to the audio.
is unfortunate. Well, I guess in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward and let's get the next slide going here. So I'm going to be paraphrasing the talking points that that Donna had written on her behalf. I hope I do a decent job, Ms. Donna. And I don't think I can actually speak as much to her background or her apprehensions. We may need to share a paragraph as to what she was going to say on this. So this is something we're going to pass on for this moment, and we'll have to get back to, I think, O'Neill. So I'm going to move to the next slide. This is an invitation that was initially shared with the network that they had created for the first meeting. I find it really fun and fanciful. And it's something that the network has also built a resource. It's a little bit, kind of building a little bit on this idea that we'll be introducing in a few minutes on this call. So we'll be sharing the slide deck after this call. You guys can look at this a little bit longer at that time. These are just some things that this facility decided to discuss in their first meeting and how they did their little invite. So I'm going to kind of shelve the discussion until after I introduce the resources that we have for you to use. One of the things that we thought was if we could create some resources to make it easier for people in the community to try this intervention, that would be great, because we know everyone's busy. We have all worked in dialysis facilities. We know how much there is to do. So if there's a tool that's ready to go that makes it easy to invite a patient to part of or to all of a QAPI or a governing body meeting, oh, isn't that nice if somebody gives that to us? So the next thing, one moment. So these are the resources. So we decided to create some resources for you guys. And the way one locates network resources is that the 4 networks that are on this call, you are all Health Services Advisory Group networks. So the first gateway is you go to hsag.com, and you'll see these various kind of buckets or links. And you kind of, the second from the right, it says ESRD networks, and you click on that, and then you choose your network. So 7 is Florida, 17 is Northern California, Hawaii, Guam. You guys know which network you're in. And then there's a separate little blue banner on the right called Patient and Family Engagement, and you click on that. So this is kind of what the network home page looks like. Here's where you see the numbers of your networks. And so this is a PFE page, and you can see that we've got the blue banners here for including patients in the group meetings for the clinic, support group resources, enhancing patients' inclusion and their goals and plan of care, and then general resources. And we also created and so each one of those banners, I'm sorry, I'll go back one. Oh, well, anyway, no, I won't. Anyway, one of the blue banners from the previous slide, when you click them, it accordions down kind of, and there's all kinds of really cool resources underneath that banner. And so that's where you find underneath the inviting patients to QAPI and governing body meetings part, we have a template that we created that you can use, and you can personalize it. You can put on your own letterhead, and you can put the patient's name, and you can kind of decide, you can edit this as you like. This is a tool for you to use. Now, I just found out that Donna and Ms. Susan are on. I think perhaps what I will do is I will introduce quickly the last few resources, and we'll go on to have them talk after that, okay? So this one is it's kind of a to-do kind of cheat sheet as to how to include a patient in or family. I mean, often family and caregivers, they may be sitting by a patient watching everything that's going down. So sometimes a great person for QAPI or governing body may be the person that isn't actually doing the dialysis, but is sitting with the person that's doing dialysis. And this is kind of a neat little sheet. It kind of has some tips for the clinic that's considering implementing this idea. And then on the back there's also kind of cheat sheet that the patient can kind of think about what they want to say And this might accompany the invitation. So invitation, you might say, like, the focus of this month's QAPI meeting is going to be addressing the high number of missed treatments in our clinic. And then the patient can use this little cheat sheet on the back and kind of put some ideas to kind of keep on track and also take notes during the meeting. So that was kind of a tool we thought would be helpful to kind of make it a more guided situation. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to turn the ball back over to O'Neill. Can you take the ball and bring us back to the slide with Susan, please?
Sure, not a problem. Let me go ahead and take the ball first. So make me the presenter. So go back to the previous slides, not a problem. And I believe it was starting here, correct?
Yes. Go back one more, please.
Oh, one moment. I believe it seems it jumped. All right. Was it this one? Correct or no?
Go back one more.
One more. This one?
Okay, 12. Yeah, this would be Ms. Susan's slide. Ms. Susan, are you on the call?
And let me unmute that line. Perfect. They're unmuted.
Oh, how wonderful. I am so sorry for the technical difficulties. I'd like to welcome Ms. Susan Dory Chatel, the FA from Lynn Haven Dialysis in Lynn Haven, Florida. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Hi, Ann. This is Susan. First, let me clarify. I am not the FA here. I am a PD nurse, but I am doing this call for Robin Gay, who is the FA here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, when we first started this, you know, we thought about what we could do and have patients more involved in this. And we talked to Ms. Schutz because she has been a patient on the home side and now she is presently on the hemo side. And we thought, what better person, because, you know, she knows both sides of our facility and everything. So this was an easy invite that, you know, we invited her to it. We talked to her, been to 2 meetings so far and everything. And we talked about, you know, what we expected and everything, and we decided, we came up with some ideas about things to do. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her talk to you about what we discussed in the meetings and how we came to an agreement on what she wants to do and how she wants to communicate this with us. Okay?
How are you doing today? Can you hear me?
Ann?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay.
Well, everything first started for me to look into being a patient advocate when we had an issue occur with visiting hours, and Ms. Robin and I had some discussion over it, and I just asked the question, is there such a thing as a patient advocate? That the patient has a voice in the concerns and the government of the dialysis unit. You know, we have people from all walks of life who have some difficulties. Some are stronger and well and can cope, and then there's others that need extra care. And so my thought was, is there someone who can have a voice that can speak for us, the patient? And that's where this all began. And Robin's discussion with me and about considering being a patient advocate. And that's where we came to. And for me, it was knowing how a patient feels until you've experienced dialysis, until you've experienced home dialysis. There is a certain amount you can feel compassion for, and certainly the families do. But when I have the opportunity as a patient advocate to sit beside someone and just tell them that there is hope, tell them that it gets better, that the beginning is not the end, and that they're going to be well cared for, and that the team that works for them cares about them, Debita cares about them. That was where it started for me, was wanting to be able to bring comfort and help to others. And then the role as coming into the meetings, and I don't sit through an entire meeting. I don't get involved in patients. I am just that person that brings help and that can say, every once in a while we need to have a good time. I'm the one that says maybe once a month we could get together and play a bingo game or just have a sense of fun, because it's amazing what the atmosphere can change with just a sense of that this is not just a terrible place to be. It is a place of life and hope. We go on and I really wanted to be able for them to voice to me what maybe they couldn't voice to somebody else. And if they just need someone to talk to in the sense of a concern, I can point them to the right direction, to a social worker or to Miss Robin or to the charge nurse or Miss Susan. I can lead them to that place. There are just places I don't go. I am the patient advocate. I help them find answers. You know, and I'm also someone that I'm very conscious of cleanliness, because I was an at-home patient. I was a PD patient, so I am very, very aware of the necessity of washing and being thorough with cleansing, and it gives me the ability, you know, of wearing gloves, of washing your hands, of washing your access, and just to be able to encourage anything that might be done. When I went to one of the meetings, I talked about how that if we make steps of 1, 2, and 3, and how that if we begin even the team member encouraging repetitive behavior in the patient, how that it brings about a more a more controlled cleanliness in the clinic. And those were little things that I saw, and this is a new journey for me. I've only been at it just a couple of months, and finding my place as a patient advocate.
Gosh, that sounds really great. Thank you, Ms. Donna, for sharing your experiences with this. And thank you as well, Ms. Susan, and thank Robin as well. I really appreciated her being willing to volunteer you guys to come.
And one thing we wanted to talk about is, you know, if Donna is actually the go-between between the clinic and the patients, you know, patients sometimes are easier to voice their concerns to another patient versus to a staff member in the beginning. We do have a communication log that teammates, patients, staff, they can write in there. So when she does come to the meetings, you know, we do have that communication log going on.
Yeah, and that's a good call. I did talk to a facility in California that was considering combining, they have a support group that kind of meets informally, periodically in the lobby, and they were thinking that part of that support group, I think they call it a meet and chat, that they might kind of see if anybody from the group wants to join the QAPI meeting that month, or see if they want any ideas brought to the QAPI meeting. So it's kind of a different way to do it. But again, it's the same idea as your communication log, to get some ideas from the clinic from a different perspective into QAPI. A lot of people have spoke to us about the idea of a moderated meeting, not having a patient for the entire meeting perhaps, but maybe choosing one bucket and having a patient attend for a little bit of a meeting, say for the grievances review only, if that's something that's been heightened that month, or ICH CAPS, if it's time for ICH CAPS coming, or coming soon for a clinic, or perhaps discussing the overall KDQOL results of a clinic. If a clinic has a higher rate of depression, asking a patient what they think might be helpful could be really amazing. So anyway, well, thanks so much for being on this call. Again, we've got those resources we've created for you. Keep in touch with your network. We are all, your network patient services people have been, as well as the QIA leads, have been developing all kinds of neat tools that all have some flavor of patient engagement in them. So reach out if you have any questions, any ideas, any reservations. I think this is something that could actually make FHM QAPI governing bodies rather fun, and I think it would be something that's not a lot of effort on the part of a clinic that could have really great impact. And one thing I could see is that patients talk, and so if you choose a patient, you know, like the patient you have that may be the voice of your clinic, kind of the one who comes and says, you know, people say that might be a good person to have in QAPI because there's somebody who also may be speaking for others and is not shy. So again, thank you so much for sharing your experience to date. And at this point, I would love to introduce Ms. Dory Chatel of the Medical Education Institute. I know Dory as also one of the originators of My Life, My Choice, which is an interactive guide, a little tool that you can use online to figure out what modality works best for you. I saw her give this presentation at NKF a few years ago. I must say the title alone made me attend, and it really kind of changed a little bit how I thought about how I perceived the task of a patient with a chronic disease. So, Dory, welcome, and you've got the floor.
Dory, your line may be muted. Let me unmute you on this end, and you have the presenter ball, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Now can you hear me?
We can hear you, thanks.
Excellent. That is much better. It's always challenging on a webinar because, you know, there's 257 of you and I can't hear any of you. So I'm just assuming that you're actually there. Anyway, thank you so much, Anne. I am really honored to be asked to present on this call, and I was thrilled to be able to get to listen to Miss Donna and Miss Susan. I'm going to pull in a little bit of what I heard Donna talking about a little bit later on. So what we're going to talk about is how to increase patient engagement and care sort of in general, not necessarily specific to QAPI meetings or monthly meetings, but I think it will be relevant nonetheless. I do not, why is this slide not moving forward? I am pushing the buttons, really I am.
Click on the slide, click on anywhere where it's blue, and you can use your mouse on your
space
bar.
All right, I missed the whole click on the slide thing. So no, I do not have anything to disclose. I have nothing to hide. That was my daughter a very long time ago. So what MEI does, we're a nonprofit organization. I've got pictures of some of the things that we've done under our MEI umbrella. I'm guessing that you all are familiar with some of those. I should have updated the core curriculum image on that slide. But our mission is to help people with chronic disease learn to manage and improve their health. So this issue of this topic of patient engagement is really important to us. And what we do is we develop evidence-based education, and part of our evidence base is the 15,000 or so different patients that I've personally interacted with over a career that has spanned now more than half my life, or in other words, way too long. So what we're going to talk about are basically three sort of buckets. One of them is, why do we want to engage people in the first place? And then once we've decided that we do, what gets in our way? And then finally, what can we do to promote patient engagement? So we're going to jump right in on why engage patients. And one of the main reasons we want to engage patients is that chronic kidney disease is, and I know this seems radical, it's a chronic disease. It's not going to go away. So we live in a healthcare milieu in this country that really is actually designed much more for acute illness than it is for chronic. So even though chronic disease is responsible for 75% of all the illness in the U.S. and 75% of all of the mortality, we really don't tend to focus on it as well. And our system of care for chronic disease is based on acute disease, and that's not a great fit. So if we think about a particular acute disease, like, say, appendicitis, the duration is short. You're not going to have appendicitis for 20 years. You're either going to die from it or you're going to recover fully. We certainly hope it's the latter. Our goal is to cure you because we can do that. We have the power. Our job when somebody has an acute illness is to provide the care that they need. And their job is basically to show up for that care and do as they're told. So take the medicines, have the surgery, recover, all of those things. And chronic disease, including chronic kidney disease, is basically the polar opposite. So we're talking about a disease that may never go away once it's diagnosed. Kidney disease, once you've got it, you've got it. It doesn't go away. Even if you have a transplant, you're still a kidney patient. The goal is not a cure only because we can't cure it. We can aim for more good days than bad days, but if we could cure it, it would be an acute disease. And that changes our job. So instead of our job as folks who take care of people with chronic kidney disease being just to provide care, our job is also to prepare patients to self-manage, and self-management is their job. So let's talk about that a little bit more. What I hear a lot in this field is the word compliance. And as you can see from my slide, I'm not a big fan of that word. And actually, I've done an entire blog titled "Compliance is a Dirty Word," and I really believe that's true. You can see all of these synonyms for compliance, and I'm not going to read them all because you all can read. But the point is basically, this isn't the job of somebody with a chronic disease. And if I had a magic wand and I could change one thing in nephrology, it might just be to lose this word completely, because this word comes out of the acute care model. And the reality is that when you have a chronic disease, any chronic disease, not just kidney disease, there are tasks that you have to do. So for kidney disease, if that happens to be the one that you've got, you have to choose an option, and Anne very kindly mentioned a tool that we developed for that purpose. But you've got to get an access. You've got to figure out what you have that might be considered a symptom, and you have to tell somebody that. You might think that's simple. It's actually not. You may have diet and fluid limits that you need to follow every day. You have to take multiple different medications correctly. You've got to do treatments, or you've got to go and get your treatment. So there's a lot that you have to do. The way that I like to look at it is that these pie charts each represent the 156 or 168 hours that we all have in a week. So if somebody does standard in-center hemo, they're in the clinic for about 12 hours a week, or about 8% of all of the hours that they have. So we tend to think that sometimes the patients only exist when they're in the chair. It's kind of a solipsism that I see in nephrology, and I've seen this for many years. But the reality is that folks are out on their own, and they are self-managing, for better or worse, much, much more of the time than they are in center. And you can see that if they do a home treatment and they only come in for a clinic visit for maybe a couple of hours once a month, that they're really on their own almost all the time. So that model of compliance, it just doesn't work. We can't have people comply when we're really not there, and compliance is an externally applied sort of a construct. So this comes from the Kaiser Family Foundation. It's one of my favorite little images because it kind of looks like a donut, and who doesn't like donuts? But the key point here is this individual behavior bar down at the bottom in the blue. I don't know, O'Neill, do I have a way to point to things?
You do have a way to point to things if you use on the left-hand side of your screen.
Oh, I think I see it. All right, so this one right here.
There you go.
Did that work? That worked. Okay, now I don't know how to make it go away. But anyway, this is a really critically important image, because what it's saying is that 40% of, or that individual behavior drives 40% of critical outcomes in health and well-being. And so healthcare itself, what all of us do, is up here at 10%. This means we have to maximize this, or we just don't stand a chance of getting to the outcomes that we and our patients and CMS really want to be seeing. So that's why this is so important. This is the chronic care model, and what I like to point to this, I think I've already highlighted in bright green. You know, it kind of looks like a hot air balloon to me, but the part that we focus on here is our vision for how patients and care teams should ideally work together. And basically you work hand in hand, where the patient brings his or her knowledge of his or her body, symptoms, medications, previous history, all of those things. And you, the care team, bring your expertise in nephrology and dialysis and how that can work. And you each need each other. This isn't a setting where it's possible to just sort of hand down knowledge from on high. You need their knowledge, they need your knowledge. This is a partnership. And if you wanted to divide the elements of the self-management role that I was talking about earlier into sort of buckets, this is not a scientific graph. I just made this up to kind of illustrate it, so that's why there's no citation on this slide. But basically, there's three kind of critical tasks, and one of them is to keep yourself safe. We did a study with a nurse PhD researcher a number of years ago that was long-term hemodialysis survivors. I think everybody that we talked to, and there were, I believe, 20 different patients from all over the country, because that's what it took to find that many patients, who had lived on hemodialysis for 15 years or longer. And all of them said that at some point during their career on hemodialysis, they had saved their own lives by knowing how things were supposed to be, how they were supposed to look, how they were supposed to feel, what was supposed to happen and what was not supposed to happen. So maintaining safety is a critical element of self-management. Reporting and managing symptoms I just referred to, but we did a study of that with non-dialysis chronic kidney disease patients because we found something really startling. A lot of them really didn't know what constituted a symptom. And so when we asked them, well, what sorts of symptoms do you have of CKD, they would say, oh, well, no, I really feel fine. I kind of think the doctor goofed up, and really I don't really have CKD. But when we asked them, going down a checklist, do you have this symptom, this one, do you have swelling, do you have fatigue, do you have a funny taste in your mouth, do you have itching, do you have shortness of breath, you know what the symptoms are. Every single one of those patients had more symptoms than they realized that they had. And so this idea that sort of people know what their symptoms are and can tell you about them is actually not true, at least in our study. And we strongly urge folks to have a symptom checklist because that's an educational tool as well as a reporting tool. And then finally, this following the treatment plan, which you might think would be easy, but of course it's incredibly complex when it has to include every single sip of fluid that you take all day long, every single medication, which of course you're supposed to take with fluid, only you don't have much fluid, and then every bite of food you put in your mouth, every treatment you go to, all of that. It's very complex, and people cannot just do this. We need to teach them how. So our goal as an organization is to create expert patients who can self-manage at a very high level. In fact, just a couple of quotes for you. And these are real quotes. I only ever use real quotes. I've got tens of thousands of them saved up. So here's someone who said, I had to go to the emergency room last night for dehydration, and now today I do not feel any buzz in my fistula. What could this mean, and is there anything I should be doing? I don't have dialysis until Tuesday, if I recall this was a Sunday, by the way. Any thoughts on what may be wrong? And of course, my first thought is, yes, why are you on the internet looking for information? You should already know this. You should know how important that buzz in your fistula is. And of course, we gave her the information, and we did tell her, but it's very scary to think about patients needing to self-manage on something as critical as access without having the information that they need. Now, to be fair, this was before Fistula First. This quote is a long time ago. I use it strictly to illustrate the importance of being an expert. Not that I necessarily think that this is still going on, and I haven't seen this particular thing in quite a while, so don't feel too bad. But here's an expert patient. Today at dialysis, after I had been there a half hour, I noticed I was only running at 250 instead of my usual 400, so that's blood flow, obviously. I called the tech over and asked him why. He said something was wrong with the arterial and he couldn't get any more. I suggested he try propping the needle, as 250 just wasn't good enough. When he untaped things, I noticed he had the arterial line hooked up to the venous needle and the venous line hooked up to the arterial needle. So here's a patient who knows what her blood flow is supposed to be, where to read it on the machine, what to do if she's not getting the blood flow that she needs, and that there's an arterial line and a venous line, and they need to be, I mean, that's an expert patient. That's what we like to see. We like to see folks be experts. And so in my world, our role is not to hand patients a fish dinner already cooked. or I'm sure you get that I am going for the parable of giving people a fish. Our job is to teach people to fish. We want them to be their own experts. So that's kind of my fundamental bottom line, and if you disagree with that, then you probably won't agree with anything else I say. But if you think about it, it makes sense that we want people to be their own experts, and we should think about it, because every one of us is a patient. We may not be a kidney patient. I'm not a kidney patient, but statistically, 50% of us have at least one chronic disease, and if we don't have one, we certainly have a loved one who does, and we certainly take care of people who do. So the golden rule really does apply, and we need to think in those patient shoes, not just the clinician shoes. So let's say we're going to do that. What are the barriers? What keeps people from being engaged? And I would argue that the number one barrier is fear, and what I typically will call the storm of emotions. And in a lot of my talks, I actually will even put in an image of a tidal wave. But the reality is, when anything drastic and different, and in this case, negative especially, happens in our lives, we have a storm of emotions, and it comes first and it takes over. And until we deal with the emotions, we actually can't really move on very well. Fear is the predominant emotion. And again, I do not have kidney disease, but I have actually at one point for a year thought that I had another very bad disease that I luckily did not have, and I know what that fear feels like, and it is pervasive and overwhelming, and it's very difficult to push through it. So we have to keep in mind that patients are scared, and here's the problem with that. People cannot learn when they are afraid. So if you remember one slide out of my entire presentation, remember the scary clown. Everybody's afraid of scary clowns, right? The problem is when adrenaline is pumping, it is impossible to form long-term memories. Can't do it. Can't be done. So we are often trying to educate patients at the worst possible time, and that's a real challenge, and I will talk about how we can address that a little later. But I do want you to remember it, and I want you to really feel it, because it's important. A second barrier is depression. Not surprisingly with the emotions, and remember one of those here is depression. At any given moment, studies show that about 1 in 5 dialysis patients is clinically depressed, and that includes symptoms of things like loss of interest, appetite changes, sleep. People might sleep more or less. They may be agitated. They might be lethargic. They might feel worthless. They may have trouble focusing, and that's hard to separate some of this from uremia. They have to be sad, blue, and cheerful. You may not see this, though. Depression can be masked, and that's very important to know. Topic of a completely different talk, but nevertheless important. And depression is a very important barrier to engagement, because if you think that nothing matters, you're not going to get engaged. Lack of knowledge is a critical barrier. You may or may not have heard the phrase over the years that people don't know what they don't know. And this is true. When you are trying to learn an entire new body of knowledge, you don't know where to start, and you don't even know what questions to ask. So as care providers, it's our job to structure that process, to provide sort of a skeleton, if you will, of key topics of information, give people basics, and then build on that foundation. Ignorance is not the same as stupidity, and that's very important. The congregation that I belong to, we literally have lots of rocket scientists. They work at NASA. We're not all rocket scientists. Just the fact that we don't know anything about rockets doesn't make us stupid. It makes us ignorant about rockets. Most people in this country are pretty ignorant about how their various organs work. It's not something that we learn. So we need to not criticize patients or sort of downgrade them in our minds, if you will, because we think that they're stupid. They're not stupid. They just don't know kidneys. They have their own areas of expertise. We all do. Think about Maslow's, think about Maslow's hierarchy. Instrumental issues are things that get in the way of being able to access the information that you need. So it may be that you can't get to the clinic because you don't have reliable transportation. It might be that you can't access the patient information that your nurse or social worker is trying to give you because you can't read, or maybe you can't see, or you can't hear very well, or you don't speak the language. There's any number of these sorts of instrumental barriers. Being homeless is certainly something that is going to take your attention away from, say, the staff trying to teach you about potassium or phosphorus. Even if potassium is going to be lethal, it may not matter if you don't have a roof over your head. So instrumental issues matter as well, and those are obviously an area that the social worker tends to be tasked with. Lack of trust in care providers is an important barrier as well. If your patients don't trust you, they won't believe you and they won't listen to you, and that can be sort of an institutional barrier in terms of just things like the Tuskegee syphilis study, if you are familiar with that, in, I think it was the 1950s into the 1960s, but I'm not looking at it right this second, but people of color were intentionally infected with syphilis and not treated to see what the natural history of syphilis was. And there are folks who still do not trust healthcare to this day, because that is still in recent memory. And so that may have nothing to do with what you personally have done, but the more that you share that you care and that you build trust, the more likely it is that your patients will be willing to engage. So we're moving on to promoting engagement, and there are things that we can do. And this was what really struck me in what Donna was saying, because I heard her say that when she is mentoring patients, when she's advocating for patients and she's talking to them, she says, there is hope. It gets better. And that, in my opinion, is the absolute most important first message that we can give to patients. And you know how many studies there are of this in dialysis? Exactly one. And it is 10 years old, and it is from the UK, and it isn't even very big. So even though I personally consider this the absolute number one most important thing that we can do, because it routes around fear and it allows people to learn, it's not something that's been highly studied. But this study, even though it was small, points in exactly the right direction, which is the more hopeful people are, the less anxious they were, the less depressed they were, the less burdened they felt by kidney disease, and the better their mental functioning was. And the social workers in the group know that that means that that predicts less hospitalization and less death. If you think about the mental component summary score of the KDQOL 36. So what this study says basically is that hope is literally a life and death prospect. And that's why I think it's so important. The author said hopefulness could serve to lessen the emotional impact of end-stage renal failure and treatment by empowering the individual to reframe threats as challenges. And reframing is a very powerful thing that we can do to help engage our patients. So how do we reframe? When we say reframing, we mean we're changing people's perspective. A very typical example of this is life gives you lemons, make lemonade. It's a different way to look at your situation. Here's my frame, literally, and this is a quote by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist who survived, I believe it was Auschwitz, and said the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And I have heard this phrased in many different ways, but meaning basically the same thing. No matter what asteroid crashes into our lives, we have the choice of how to frame it, of whether to look for a lesson in it, of whether to find something good that comes out of it, or whether to let it destroy us. And sometimes it does. So I like to use these slides actually when I give talks to patients and family members, but they're basically fun for anybody. My point basically being that anything that happens in your life can be reframed, can be looked at in more than one way. So this particular optical illusion is both a duck and a bunny, depending on which way you look. So obviously if you look to the left, that's the duck bill. If you look to the right, that's the bunny nose, and the bill becomes the bunny ears. So we're looking at one picture, but we're seeing it two different ways. Every picture is like that. There may even be more than two ways to look at any given picture. Another way that we can help people route around barriers and help them engage is to find out what's important to them. Some of you may know Bill Peckham. I've known Bill for, oh gosh, I think 20 years now. And one of Bill's great loves is travel. And actually, when he got out of college and before his kidneys failed, his plan was actually to be a ship captain. And so he was thrilled when he got his next stage machine and was able to charter a boat and take it out with a bunch of friends. And he's had a number of other really exciting adventures. But that's his motivation. His motivation is the hook. And being able to travel is something that's very motivating for him, and we each have our own motivation. So in all of the materials that we developed as a medical education institute, we use a motivational underpinning, a theory called self-determination theory. And this is a pretty complicated graphic, but all I really want you to be looking at here is the color coding. So motivation for engaging in healthcare, or anything else for that matter, is along a continuum that goes from a motivation, so I kind of picture the Valley Girl, whatever, to extrinsic motivation, where people do things because others make them. So your mother makes you make your bed every day, or your prison guard makes you go out to the exercise yard for an hour a day, or whatever. But it's somebody applying pressure from externally. And then all the way to green, which is intrinsic motivation. People doing things because they want to. And that's where we want our patients to be. We want them to be intrinsically motivated experts. We want them to do the things they need to do because it's in their own best interest to do it. So here's the thing. If you look at compliance, you'll see that that falls under extrinsic motivation. And this is just additional proof that this is a word we do not want to be using, because we don't want to be imposing restrictions on people from outside. We want to be engaging them in what they need to do to feel their best and live the longest. And I have, among other things, I've been pre-diabetic for 15 years, and for the last 2 or 3, I actually will check my blood sugar. I check it every morning. I check it, sometimes I'll check it 2 hours after I eat something new, because that's my best tool. And the thing is, I'm needle phobic. I've been needle phobic since I was 4 years old. And I will poke myself with a sharp object every morning because I need that information to manage my blood sugar. That's where we want our patients to be. We want them doing the things they need to do. And by the way, I eat a super low-carb diet every single darn day. I track every bite of food I eat because I don't want to turn out like my dad, and that's my motivation. He's got type 2, and I don't want it. So this is personal for me as well as professional. And I think it's probably personal for a lot of us as well as professional. So self-determination theory has 3 critical psychological needs that have to be met to help move people along that continuum from a motivation to extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation, where we want people to be. And those are competence, feeling like you're able to do what you set out to do, autonomy, feeling like you are setting goals for yourself, and relatedness, feeling connected to others. So I'm just going to talk about each of those for a very brief second. Competence is basically the same thing as self-efficacy, and what it means is you see that you can succeed at something. You almost can think of competence as success. You can see this baby here. I'll use my little highlighter again. See where this baby's foot touches that little ring on this toy? That little ring is making a noise. It probably goes, or, it does something that gives that baby feedback that makes that baby realize, I did this. I made a thing happen. If I do this again, this thing will happen again. Look at that. I have success. I did a thing. That's what competence is, and the reason that I showed it in a baby is because self-determination theory applies along the entire lifespan, from infancy on. Maybe you all took psychology classes in high school or college like I did, and maybe you remember those studies of the babies in the orphanages where nobody picked them up, and so they failed to thrive and they died. It wasn't just the picking up. It was failing to meet their competence needs. When they cried, nobody came. So competence is a critical life element. Autonomy, piloting the ship that is your life, making active choices, not feeling like you're just buffeted by the tides and people done you wrong, things happen to you without your input, feeling like you have choices. And that's really important when people have a chronic disease and feel like they've lost a lot of autonomy. This is a quote that is actually so important that we have it on the door of our office. And it's at Gregory White Smith is a brain cancer survivor, or was for something like 20 amazing years. And he says it's all about control. Take away a patient's sense of control over his life, and you have hurt him more than any injury or disease. Give him back that sense of control, and you have helped him more than any drug or therapy. He can make miracles happen. Every one of our patients can make miracles happen if we can put them back in the driver's seats of their own lives and support them in becoming their own experts. Relatedness, it is not at all surprising, I think, to any of us that patients who have more support and feel more support are much more likely to succeed and to be engaged in their care. It's very difficult to do this chronic disease job, and it's even harder to do it without feeling like there are folks behind you cheering you on. There are some brief motivational techniques, and seriously, I could spend 3 hours just on this, but I won't because we don't have 3 hours. So, very quickly, motivational interviewing, it's, not so quickly that I can skip the fact that these otters are holding hands so that they don't slip away from each other in the night when they're sleeping, and that's like the cutest thing ever, and they're hand in hand, so there. Because self-determination theory and motivational interviewing go hand in hand. At any rate, motivational interviewing, it's usually used for like a 50-minute clinical hour for things like addiction and, psychotherapy and whatever, and none of us gets 50 minutes with our patients. Even when they call me on the phone, and they do, I don't get 50 minutes with them. But we can use some of these techniques in just the minute or the 2 minutes that we do have, and it changes the way that we interact with patients, because it is person-centered, it's client-centered. So what we can do is we can look at the whole person, not just the person in the chair with the needle, with, getting the urea in the water removed, but we can ask people, what matters to you, what's important to you, what are your goals? And then we can use that as the motivational hook. Getting to know your patients is really vital, getting to know them as people. What we often try to do is beg or plead with people. Sometimes we yell at people. I see all of this on the patient side. I belong to about 8 different social media groups. I've got people calling me on the phone. I've got people emailing me. I've got, like I mentioned, 15,000 patients worth of history. I know what can happen in a clinic. My guess is if you are on this webinar, you're not in a clinic that does those things, and that's awesome. But there are folks out there who do. We don't want to be hearing about people yelling at patients. Just imagine how much less work you networks would have to do if this didn't happen. But at any rate, even things like trying to problem solve for patients. All you have to do is put your pills with your toothbrush. We don't want to solve problems for people. What we want to do is help them solve their own problems. We want to turn it back to them. So what we do, a critical part of motivational interviewing is to listen without talking. Just listen. Make eye contact. Repeat back what somebody says in your own words to see if you have it right. This is, by the way, an excellent technique in your own relationships. It will make everything better. And you also can point out that emotion. Wow, I can hear that you're angry about this, or oh, I'm so sorry that you're so sad, or, whatever it is. Listen for the emotion and point it out. And sometimes people haven't had that done. It can feel very healing just to do that. And then we want to ask them open-ended questions. So we don't want to just say, do you have any new symptoms? It's just too easy to say no. This is like going to a store. If a salesperson comes up to you when you're looking at something and just says, can I help you? How easy is it to say no? Whereas if they come up to you and they say, wow, looks like you really like red. Well, now maybe you can have a conversation, and that's kind of where you want to be with your patients. So who, what, where, when, why, how questions are better than yes, no, or did you, didn't you. I love this because I think it's hilarious. It's too bad that some of the builds don't work on these slides, but I guess this wasn't one with a build. At any rate, making sure that our patients understand the language we're using, because often our language, our technical language, can be above people's heads and they may not understand it. So yes, the baldness pill, not a suppository. And you know, here are some of the words that I have sort of routinely heard, even going back to my nursing assistant days, which, trust me, is going back quite a ways. We need to explain the words. People don't understand them. Also, you've got to be careful with some of the abbreviations, because when patients see that you put in their charts that they have SOB, they do not know that you're talking shortness of breath. And I'm sure we've all heard that joke. When we talk with patients and with our own partners at home and with our children and with any adult ever, it's a really good idea to avoid these words because they instantly raise people's hackles. And I joke with my husband about this all the time because he likes to use that should word with our adult daughters. And I say, you should not use the should word, but really, it's best to try to figure out ways to word things that are not controlling. So rather than you have to follow your fluid limits, it's, you know, well, how do you feel? You know, you've got 6 liters on. Do you feel any different? Don't laugh when you say that because it's pretty serious. But, you know, I mean, I've heard some pretty shocking and startling fluid gains, and I'm sure you have as well. And then we want to help people find their own motivation, and setting goals and figuring out reasons why it might be good to make a change is what gets people engaged. And I like this third bullet here especially. We cannot persuade someone to be motivated. This is not about persuasion. This is about finding the motivation that people already have and maybe haven't connected to, maybe haven't even thought about it. You know, a diagnosis of kidney failure and starting dialysis, it really is a sort of an asteroid in your life. And people, I think, often do realize this is a second chance. Maybe I've been spared to do something important. Those are thoughts that are worth supporting. You know, well, what could you do? You know, you have a second chance. You have more life than you maybe would have had now that dialysis is available. I mean, just 50 years ago, it wasn't. What can you do with that time? How can we help you get there? How can we break that down into little steps? So this is, I'm sure you've been hearing the theme here. This is about finding out what matters to people and helping them to get there. So we do use evidence-based education. I told you about HOPE, and so did Donna. We talked about self-determination theory, showed you the chronic care model. Everything that we do, we build adult learning principles into, and we use published research. And then we use actually not even just patient input, but patient, clinician, care partner, all those things. This is the model that we use whenever we develop any materials. And we've got some tools that you can use that are free. So there's a free slide toolkit with 6 decks of slides that are mostly pictures and very few words, only the words that were absolutely necessary for the handouts to make sense. So there's the toolkit that you can download, and you can get these slides, and this is being recorded, and so there's, you know, kind of no surprise here. But this is a free toolkit that has the slides and the learning objectives and the speaker's notes and all of these things, and we didn't copyright it. We did these as a gift to the community. They are free and you can adapt them. And if you translate them into another language, we just ask that you give them back to us so that we can share them further. We also recorded these slides as videos with Mary Beth Callahan, who is fabulous, and she's a long-term renal social worker. And so if you want to sort of reinforce the messages that you're giving patients in your own education, you can send them to these little classes, and they're online. They're each about half an hour, and they're free, and they can go to them 24/7. Kidney School, I think at this point a lot of folks are very aware of Kidney School, and we baked all of the things that I talked about into Kidney School. HOPE is already there. It's written at a 6th grade reading level. We built in the motivation. We support competence and autonomy and relatedness. And I think Kidney School can be used in a number of different ways. I've heard some wonderful creative ways used by the networks. Home dialysis central. We heard that Donna was on PD and now she's on hemo. It's, wow, is that an old image? Thanksgiving, sorry about that. But, you know, we've heard that people switch from one modality to another, and that's not at all uncommon in a long career, if you will, with kidney failure. That's a typical thing. And so people need to know what the options are. Here's a link on the site to our treatment matcher. Help, I need dialysis, that's sort of the Bible. It's, we actually offer continuing education credit for nurses and technicians, and I think, but I would not swear to it, social workers for this book in a package deal on our CE website. If you want to know what that is, I can email you or let Ann know, because I didn't put that on there. And then the decision aid, My Life, My Dialysis Choice, is based on that help book. So that was our effort to turn that dialysis Bible and 600 references and 3 years worth of mapping of dialysis options onto lifestyle considerations into an interactive tool that is written at the 5th grade level. It's in English and Spanish, and it's free online. And the early research with this is looking really, really positive. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. More pilots are sort of in the works right now. I would absolutely encourage you all to go to this site, to take this tool yourself, to choose your own top 3 or 4 values, and see if this will bring up the option that you always kind of thought in the back of your mind, if God forbid my kidneys failed, this is what I would do. Because I know I had one of those, and I'm pretty sure you all do too. So for takeaways, what I would really like people to remember is that we patients, remember we're all patients, produce our own health outcomes. So your kidney patients produce their own health outcomes. 40% of health outcomes is driven by patient behavior. This highlighter is super fun, by the way. Our job as people who take care of people with kidney disease, a chronic disease, is to support patients in their job, which is to self-manage effectively, to become their own experts. The keys to that are hope, and hope always needs to be the first message. Tapping into people's motivation and helping them learn what they need to know. And then there are all sorts of wonderful evidence-based materials out there to help you. I was just on the HSAG website last week. There are fabulous resources on there. NKF has some fabulous resources. MEI has some fabulous resources. Renal Support Network, AKF. There's an abundance of wonderful materials out there. There's kind of almost no excuse at this point for not being able to find something to help on almost any topic, and even in a lot of languages, although never as many as we would like. So thank you very much. This was super fun, and if Ann would like me to answer questions, I could answer questions. O'Neill, what I don't know is how to give you back the ball, so I'm just going to let you take that.
All right, I'll take the presenter ball back. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, just a reminder, if you have any questions, we do have approximately 15 or so minutes remaining for today's call. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them using the chat feature. Send in your questions to all panelists and indicate the ESRD network you are affiliated with, and we appreciate you sending those questions in. Of course, questions we received earlier regarding whether or not a copy of today's presentation will be made available. As you heard a moment ago from Dory, and I believe referenced by Ann, we will work towards providing a PDF copy of the information, so your ESRD network representative or should be in touch with you as to how you can get the information, unless Ann wants to jump in and provide additional information as it relates to that. But we'll pause for a moment to give you a chance to submit any questions you might have based on the information that was shared on today's call.
All right. Thank you, O'Neill. Thanks so much, Dory. I really enjoyed this presentation. I enjoyed it again.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, and that little highlighter is fun, isn't it?
Oh,
but
it's way
let's
fun.
see. In terms of questions from the group, if you guys also have any questions for Donna or Susan, or just in general about the idea of incorporating patients into QAPI, there's kind of excuse me, I'm sorry. There's kind of an effect of when one is a patient and just chronically ill, one sometimes doesn't feel like one has a lot to offer because day to day you're just trying to manage what you've got going on. And one of the things that can be really powerful for patients, and this also goes for patient advocates, peer mentors, patients that are part of support groups, is patients are reminded of the things that they have to offer others. And with QAPI, that is something where it's kind of a really neat little loop because not only is the patient able to help others in the clinic and help the clinic be better, also the patient indirectly may have an idea that it makes their own care better. And then there's kind of that efficacy, like I've had an impact on the world that can really be really rewarding and powerful. Just little things. I spoke to a clinic where they had someone that showed up to QAPI and made the suggestion of putting a hook in the patient bathroom so that she could hang up her purse. A little thing, right? And the clinic was like, wow, we never thought of this. And they put up a hook. And it was really powerful, just that little thing, because the patient's wife had suggested it, and it had come up in QAPI as a small suggestion. It was easy to implement, and it's really, it has legs. Just a little thing like that gets other people to say, well, how about this? And how about this? So that's kind of the inspiration we wanted to share on the call. Go ahead.
Anne, I just was going to say that that's a really good, not very big, but a really good example of supporting patients' competence. You know,
yep.
that they asked for a thing to happen, and then they made it happen.
Exactly. And this is also kind of where the power is. Like I've heard of facilities like you know, having a suggestion board that's somewhat public. Like so say there's an ICH, say one posts the things one's working on to boost this particular part of the ICH CAP score, and on that bulletin board people tack up suggestions as to how to improve something, and then it's actually taken and followed through on. That can be amazing. The same with a patient who files a grievance and says, you know, I really think it would be great if we had an extra channel in my language on the channel lineup. And even if you're not able to give what the patient had asked, just the fact that you're listening to the suggestion and you've looked into it, and that respect, and hey, what a thank you for talking to us. That alone can be very powerful. So I don't know if we have any questions in the chat at this time. Does anybody have any questions they want to bring at this time? Any other thoughts? We will do our best to be able to share slides. We're still looking into permissions on some images.
Hey,
and,
Ann,
also, oh, sorry, I had one more point. Do you mind?
No, not a problem. Sure.
Oh, yeah. The whole thing about, one thing about the concern about HIPAA being a barrier of inviting patients to QAPI or to governing body, one of the benefits of kind of making a moderated meeting, perhaps even just in the beginning or maybe forever, is that it's a little bit shorter. QAPI meetings can be long. And also that way, like say there's an area of review of clinic outcomes where it's more likely that a patient's name might be shared. Maybe that might be after the part where the patient maybe has weighed in what their idea about, you know, changes in whatever, you know. So that might be one way to kind of manage the HIPAA concern. O'Neill?
Thank you so much, Ann. A question did come in a moment ago. Let me see. Let me unmute Susan's line, or because it's a question that came in. Can we hear more from the patient, Donna, about anything she would like to see changed or improved related to patients attending QAPI meetings? So let me unmute that line, and your line's currently unmuted. I'll turn it over to you.
Again, I've only attended 2, and I'm early in this patient advocate role. I think that in every clinic that represents the patients, but it needs someone that has you have to understand that dialysis patients are family. We are on that floor together. We are concerned about them. That clinic other than a dialysis patient. And I think to have a voice offered in that meeting is a powerful tool, not only for Debita and those that are in the business of taking care of dialysis patients, but it's also a powerful tool for the patient and the patient's family.
Thank you, Donna. That's really neat that you would, yeah, I think I agree completely. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. We are, let us know if there's any kind of new thoughts you have when you go through these meetings going forward. We're happy to share on your behalf. Any other questions from chat that we would like to address?
And before we continue, I apologize, Donna, but I believe your connection, you're going in and out a little bit. I think you said maybe you wanted to add something else, and I do see someone who submitted a comment indicating that they'd like to add a comment. Please use the chat window and send your comments to all panelists and indicate your ESRD network if you don't mind, so that we can route this to the proper person to help with getting an answer. I'll pause for a moment. I do see something that came in a moment ago, and just to see if, Donna, if there was something else that you wanted to add to what you were saying a moment ago.
I do want to say that I do not stay for the entire meeting. I come in and I basically share what I've experienced that week, maybe what I have dealt with. I do meet with new patients and spend time with them. So I don't stay through the entire meeting. Number one, I don't want to, and number two, I don't think it would be proper for me to do so. And so it is a limited amount of time that I do spend in that meeting, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Donna. I think that would make things more manageable, at least at the beginning. We do have one comment here. Someone is asking, says, really fantastic presentation, Ms. Dory. Thank you, Doris. And she's asking if there's a literature or website that talks more about this patient-centered approach and philosophy. And she points out that the company she works for and others are incorporating more patient advisors in their discussions. Off the top of our heads, we have a fair amount of information on our website that kind of has tools and kind of some of the background thinking. There is, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of the people. Well, anyway, Dory, do you want to take this question?
You know, most of what we do is actually aimed at patients directly in terms of materials. So the presentations that I do tend to be to professionals about how to help patients. We do have a CE website, and that has some of these presentations, but actually I think the HSAG website does have some terrific resources on exactly that. And then if more is needed, we should think about what would be helpful and then maybe how we could get that put together.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. Any other questions? You, of course, if you think of something later, you can email your network patient services person. You could also have my email, since I've been peppering you with invitations to this for a little while, and we'll be happy to get back to you. We also will be communicating about the availability of decks and how to get them. Another thing that can be really good is we have some presentations on the continuing education part of the HSAG website that also give free CEUs for nurses and techs that you can you create a login and a password, and then you have access to those free presentations for CEUs, and there's some really good stuff there as well. We are hoping to see if we can maybe have this join there, but if we cannot, there are other things. And there's also the individual corporations also sometimes have support group type educational groups. Some of them are geared towards choosing modalities or maybe towards new patients, but those can also be powerful for patients to kind of get some agency and learn about things, especially as they're new and a little bit overwhelmed. Some of the corporations we're aware have self-paced little modules that the new patients can kind of learn at their own pace. These are all ways of promoting agency and self-efficacy for patients that are kind of, so the more you know and at your own pace, you can learn things. And that's part of kind of becoming an engaged patient. One thing I also think is really great is asking people what they would like, asking permission to educate a patient. I think some of us, when myself included, when we're moving really fast, we forget to ask a patient, would you like to be taught about this right now? And that alone can make a big difference, because the answer may be no, I feel really ill, can we talk about this another time? And then when you come back, they may be more willing to listen because you were respectful and asked about this. So I think there's all different types of tools. This is something that we love to talk to you guys about. And anyway, so I think we're kind of getting close to the end of our presentation. There will be an evaluation at the end of it, and there will be a link that will help you get your CEU certificate, completion certificate for this. Anyone else in the panelists, or O'Neill or Dory, have anything to add at this time?
Anne, you just were making me really jealous that I hadn't thought of including that respect piece, and would you like to learn about this right now, because you're absolutely right, and that's, if I update that talk, I'll try to add that in. But thank you for making that point.
Yeah, well, time and time again I hear, people will call the network and say, somebody just got really mad, and often I kind of say, well, okay, so what do you think was going on with the patient before there was an outburst, before words were said, before somebody threw a paper towel at your tech, whatever happened? And sometimes it may just be something like people coming over and saying, hey, your phosphorus was high again. And I think we sometimes forget. I mean, I know, for instance, myself, I'm touchy about my weight. So if somebody I don't know, or if I'm in a bad mood, comes up to me and says, hey, Anne, you need to lose weight, otherwise you're going to die, I may say, like, who are you and how dare you? And then you've got kind of an outburst, a pushback, and you have, and I may not want to listen to you again. So sometimes you have to say, hey, you have to be kind of say, hey, would you be interested in this, Anne? Is this a good time for me to talk to you? I've got something here that you take it or leave it. And then eventually when I am ready to say, you know what, let's talk about my weight. What was that thing you were talking about last week? Then at least you kind of respected my autonomy to kind of decide when I want to be taught something or not, when I'm in a mood to learn. And our patients in general, probably one of the biggest things that they don't often tell us is that they are very frightened. They're trying, they've got their best faces on. I've had patients say to me the only time they wear makeup is when they come to dialysis, because they're really trying to fortify themselves. And we need to be aware of that, even though they may not seem as frightened as they sometimes are. So, and that affects how people learn.
It does, and another, if you all see your clinics doing this, you will know that you are coming out of an acute model, and you will know that you are coming out of a maybe not as patient-centered of place as you could. If there's a sort of initiative where we're going to have a topic of the month without any patient input, and this month we're all going to learn about phosphorus, whether or not that's relevant to anybody, that's not a good sign. At the very least, if that's the sort of approach you want to do, send around a kind of a little survey of what topic is most important to you, and at least pick topics that the patients identify, because that does give them autonomy.
Right. Oh, we also got another chat here. Somebody's mentioning a program called Kidney Smart that's open to the public, no cost, and family are welcome.
Yeah, that's Debita's CKD education program. It's been around a while. It's kind of the analogous to the Fresenius Kidney Care Advocate program, and they're both good programs.
Yeah, this person pointed out that it's unbranded, so it means other people can use it. So, okay, well, thank you, everyone. I think we're going to close this up. O'Neill, you want to take us on out for the day? Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Thank you, Dory, for sharing us your wisdom and your slides and your artwork. O'Neill?
All right. Thank you once again. Just another reminder that once we end the event, a post-event evaluation will display, giving you the ability to provide your thoughts. And after you complete the post-event evaluation, you will then be presented with the ability to obtain access to certificate for the 1 CEU credit. So thank you, everyone, once again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to see you on a future call. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.